This is my 2.3 physiology recovery. So, after hard intense exercise or even after a light jog, our body systems need time to recover. When we exercise, our muscles get broken down and we also use our energy systems to make muscular contractions happen. As a process of recovery, we need to replenish our glycogen stores and our other bodily stores and get back to exercise as quickly as possible. Because, however, if you're an elite athlete, then your training regime is going to be intense and full on, which means you need to recover as quickly and efficiently as possible. To do this, we need to rest and recover. This includes EPOC and cryotherapy and many other techniques. In this presentation, I will be describing and explaining all of these factors, how they happen, and the benefits of them. So, EPOC. What does EPOC stand for? It stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Excess post-exercise oxygen consumption is the extra oxygen consumed above resting level. During submaximal exercise, we enter a steady state and therefore don't have a massive oxygen deficit. This is because we don't use our anaerobic system as much as we do when we are in maximal exercise. As we can see in the maximal graph, we have a larger deficit because we haven't entered a steady state and have been using our aerobic system. However, on the submaximal graph, we have less amount of recovery time because we haven't exhausted all of our energy systems, which means that extra oxygen we need to consume to compensate will be less compared to maximal because we haven't used as much. Furthermore, in maximal exercise, we have more of oxygen deficit because we have worked more anaerobically compared to submaximal exercise. Because we have had more of an oxygen deficit, we need to consume more oxygen after exercise to compensate for the bigger oxygen deficit. This means that recovery is going to be slower and longer. Our recovery starts off with alactic recovery, which means we recover the ATP-PC system, and this is fast recovery because it doesn't take long to replenish our ATP-PC system. However, our lactic acid recovery will be longer in maximal exercise compared to submaximal exercise because we have worked more anaerobically, which means that we will need longer to recover to get our lactic acid out of our system. Whereas in submaximal exercise, we enter a steady state compared to maximal exercise, which means we don't accumulate as much lactic acid, which means that we can recover our energy systems quicker and therefore get back to exercise quicker. So what is oxygen deficiency? Oxygen deficiency is the shortage of oxygen, and when we are working submaximally, we enter a steady state, which means that we have less of an oxygen deficiency. Whereas in maximal exercise, we don't reach a steady state, which means we have more of an oxygen deficiency. So, fast components. The fast components of recovery are known as the alactic recovery system. It is the role of the alactic recovery system to resaturate myoglobin with oxygen. Furthermore, it is the role to resaturate hemoglobin with oxygen and resynthesize the ATP stores. To resaturate myoglobin, it takes 0.5 liters of oxygen to resaturate it. To resynthesize ATP, it requires using 3 to 4 liters of oxygen. As we can see in the graph, we start with 100% ATP. After the first run, we use 50%. After 30 seconds of recovery, we have replenished our ATP but only to 90%, because you never fully recovered unless you completely stop exercising. For example, in a football game, you would have periods of the game where you would sprint rapidly. However, there will be moments in the game where the ball will be down the other end of the field, so this will give you sufficient time to recover. Furthermore, the only time you would fully recover is when the game is over. When we are in exercise, we use ATP to make muscles contract. So the second part of recovery is known as the lactacid recovery. The purpose of lactacid recovery is to remove carbon dioxide, reoxidize lactic acid, and replenish our glycogen stores. Lactacid recovery is a slow, long process which can take up to 48 hours depending on how hard you pushed yourself in exercise. So as we can see on the graph, the A section in blue, this is our alactic recovery. This will happen really quickly, whereas the D is our lactacid recovery, and this will happen over a longer period of time. We can see that our alactic recovery can happen within 2 to 4 minutes, whereas our lactacid system can take a lot longer. So, part of the process is the Cori cycle. So the Cori cycle allows lactate to go through the liver and be processed into glucose by a series of chemical reactions within the liver. This process happens by lactate going into the liver to be reoxidized to pyruvate, and then a process called gluconeogenesis happens to make glucose. Furthermore, our heart can use lactate as a fuel source, so there are other ways that lactate can be beneficial to our body. 25% of lactate is processed by the Cori cycle. During exercise, our bodies produce waste products. Carbon dioxide is produced during both aerobic and anaerobic exercise. To remove the waste product, carbon dioxide, otherwise known as CO2, we increase our cardiac output and our ventilation. We carry 70% of CO2 in the blood, which combines with H2O. We also get 23% carried around the body by hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin. And the final 3% is dissolved in the plasma. Now we know what happens to carbon dioxide. 65% is converted to CO2 and H2O, whereas the 25% goes to the Cori cycle. So as our recovery, we have metabolic needs and active recovery. So metabolic needs, after exercise, you will inspire more oxygen to allow your body systems, such as the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system. After exercise, our body's systems don't rapidly decrease, they gradually decrease until we're at resting levels. However, when we exercise, the muscles we use for our cardiovascular system and our respiratory system work harder, which means we have to breathe in more oxygen to make sure the heart gets sufficient amounts of oxygen, so the heart can work harder and faster. On an epoch graph, the area is between the alactic and the lactacid system, and that's known as the oxygen threshold. So what can we do for our active recovery? After exercise, it is vital to recover efficiently so that we can perform at the same standard or better in future exercise. After exercise, it is important to get vital nutrients into our body. These are known as macronutrients. These are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. After exercise, we need to consume 300 to 400 calories worth of carbohydrates to replenish our glycogen stores. Additionally, after 2 hours, we need to consume another 300 to 400 calories worth of carbohydrates. We have to do them in manageable amounts, otherwise our body won't be able to process the nutrients efficiently, and we will end up feeling bloated and heavy. In addition, it is also crucial that we get some form of protein into our body to repair muscle tissue that has been damaged during exercise. There are many other factors which can also reduce the pain of recovery, but ultimately recovery is going to take 48 hours depending on the exercise that you have done. Furthermore, there are techniques that can reduce DOMS, which stands for delayed onset muscle soreness. These techniques include cryotherapy. Cryotherapy is cold treatment such as ice baths, ice packs, and cold chambers. These treatments help vasodilate the muscles, which means the swelling in the muscle will go down. Um, After a while, the muscle will start to warm up, and muscles will have less swelling. This will decrease the amount of recovery time. Many athletes use this as a form of recovery because it's quick and effective, although some athletes can't stand the cold temperatures, so they don't use it. This is a good form of recovery for elite athletes because they're going to go through hard, vigorous training day in, day out, and need to recover as quickly as possible to be as fit and perform as well as they can. That was my 2.3 recovery presentation.